before sunrise on a mild summer morning in June 1995. A 27-year-old television news anchor named Jodi Huisentruit hurriedly left her apartment in Mason City, Iowa, headed for work. But she never arrived, and her disappearance has never been solved. In 2003, two television news reporters created FindJodi.com, a website dedicated to preserving Jodi's memory and keeping her case alive. This is the official Find Jodi podcast. Welcome back to the Find Jodi podcast. I'm Scott Fuller. Today is June 27th, 2021, and it marks the 26th anniversary of a sad commemoration date, June 27th, 1995, when Jodi Huisentruit was abducted, never to be seen again. No arrests have been made, and her case remains unsolved and open today. On this episode of the Find Jodi podcast, we're joined by the entire team of Find Jodi volunteers. I joined the team about a year and a half ago. I work for KUS Radio currently in Austin, Minnesota, which is the same media market as Jodi worked in. Josh Benson founded the website and the organization along with his one-time boss, Gary Peterson. Josh is now in Tampa, Florida, with his family, including his wife, Tara Manis-Benson. She is also a member of our team, and she has a background in television news production. Caroline Lowe has over 40 years of investigative reporting experience, many of those at WCCO in Minneapolis-St. Paul. She is also now a licensed private investigator in California. Jay Alberio was head of investigations for the Woodbury, Minnesota Police Department. He is now retired, having spent his entire career in law enforcement. The Find Jodi team works across multiple states in 3 time zones, but we get together online at the same time and discuss recent events, and we compare notes, and we did so again on Thursday night last week, this time to record a team roundtable of our reflections of the past year and the past 26 years in covering this case. That's coming up next. All right, so the first place we should probably start is what we're doing to commemorate the 26th anniversary. Caroline, do you want to talk about that? I think you were among the team, one of the driving forces for the Lights for Jodi campaign that we kicked off. I think it was for the 25th last year.
I think one of the things we struggle with every year is what can we do? What can we do that's going to have some impact, that's going to be meaningful? And we don't have a traditional milestone anniversary, if you will, this year. It's the 26th year. So we are, as we did last year, we're asking people to turn on their lights or light a candle just to keep Jodi's memory alive. It's something they did early on in the investigation, and we're doing that again. We are also putting together a new billboard. We have one that should be up in the next couple weeks. We will have some new displays on our website. I'm doing a post on 26 facts. 26 years, 26 facts. In the past year, one of the things we've struggled with, again, is our whole push of our podcast has been to build as much of a factual record. So that's been a big push, a passion of all of ours. And so those are some things we are doing this year, but not being a milestone one as such, it's a bit more of a struggle to figure out how to keep Jodi from being forgotten.
And Tara, too, I was going to ask you about the social media aspects of cases like this when you get to benchmarks or when developments happen. What have you seen in other cases or Jodi's case over the years when it comes to the internet playing a part in these cold cases?
I think that's what really keeps this kind of stuff going, is that people find their niche and they really connect to it. They want to find a way to feel like they're still a part of it. Try and keep it going, using hashtags, using different things like that, and keeping the lights on for Jodi, as Caroline, thought up, which was, I think, brilliant because it brings her to light and makes the community light up for her. It's one of those things that you really want to, kind of push, and the social media aspect is perfect for that.
On Jodi's, what would have been her 50th birthday, the team launched a series of billboards in Mason City, and the billboards have gone to different locations, different parts of town. Josh, can you talk about the future of the billboards here in the next few weeks and for the rest of this year?
Absolutely. What we did when we had a nice donation come in, and we decided to use those proceeds to put up those billboards few years ago, and we wanted to, spread those out across Mason City, so at least, in strategic spots, people would see this billboard and they would reach out with tips. Over time, obviously, that gets pretty costly, so we decided to narrow that scope to focus on more of one location now, and it hasn't been updated in a while, so just finished up some graphics with a new picture of Jodi and a new slogan that Tara came up with, which is great. It says, "Don't sit in silence. The time to talk is now." So
I think the team kind of came up with it.
Yeah.
We were sitting on one of these.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think now when people are driving by, they're going to see this at the location. It's going to be put up. A great picture of Jodi. This is a picture we just came across. It looks like she's sitting in a vehicle. She's waving to the camera. This is such a great shot of her and shows her personality so well. Also leads us to a link on the website so people that are driving by can go there and they can leave a tip. So I think what we're finding is this case is aging so much that we got to get this information in sooner than later because, as we've talked about so many times, people forget what happens, they forget the details, and so the time is now to talk about it. And I think that's going to be really crucial in moving ahead.
And Jay, I wonder if you would talk about the billboard too from an investigative standpoint with a case this old. With your hat on, what does a billboard being present in the town that Jodi disappeared from 26 years ago, what does that do possibly for the investigation?
Well, that billboard is a constant reminder of Jodi's disappearance, and also people driving by seeing that, it gets them thinking the case isn't going away. And everybody in that town that goes by and sees those billboards, they think about that day. If they lived in Mason City the day Jodi disappeared, they're thinking back and they're racking their brains to see if there's anything that they have that could be important to come forward with that information. So it's just a constant reminder. And anniversary dates are a good reminder too. That perpetrator out there knows that date, the time they took Jodi from the world. And it's going to be just another reminder. That person is going to be sitting there thinking about it. And they've gotten away with it for 26 years now. And hopefully this will be the year that that piece of information comes forward. And that's what the importance of that billboard is, to keep that out there, keep people thinking about it and talking about it.
And we have a lot of people who listen to this podcast overseas in different states, obviously aren't going to be in Mason City to see the billboard. So I'm going to go ahead and put this billboard mock-up on our Facebook cover photo so you guys can see what it's going to look like. And that's going to be the same image that's going to be used in the new billboard.
And I think one thing that we really want to drive home with this is that, hey, it's been 26 years. The time to talk is now. Why are we all still talking about this? It's so sad for Jodi's family to be sitting another Christmas, another birthday, another anniversary without answers.
That really came home to us when we were up in Long Prairie, Minnesota for the golf tournament honoring Jodi a couple weeks ago, and to sit there with Jodi's sister going through Jodi's albums and think, I can't believe that we still don't have answers. And it's so humbling and it's disheartening at times that more hasn't happened. So I feel like something has to be done. And if we're not doing it, what would be out there? Occasional blips, occasional stories, occasional press releases. But if we don't keep going, who's going to continue the search to find Jodi?
Yeah, Caroline, Jay, and I were up there in Long Prairie, Jodi's hometown, a couple of weeks ago. And for many years now, they've had a memorial golf tournament in Jodi's name, and the money goes to local scholarships. And oftentimes you get to meet the students and the young people who benefit from those scholarships. It was good for me. Caroline and Jay, jump in here. It was good for me. It's always good for me to go up there, make kind of like a pilgrimage to Jodi's hometown. It makes it more tangible. It's one of those moments where this is a real life, this is a real person, but also to see Jodi's legacy live on in some kind of way.
It was very emotional. I end up at the end of the day before we had dinner just walking the course. This is the course where Jodi golfed. This is where she became the Minnesota high school champion. And I went to her bench and dedicated to her. I said, Jodi, where are you? I got very teary, just thinking, Jodi, where are you? And to be there with her friends and the people who knew Jodi, not the Jodi just we know on TV, but the Jodi who was such a rising star, such a huge part of this small Minnesota town. And it was very moving. It was very sad, but also very inspiring that we have to keep going.
Yeah, it was a great opportunity to talk to some of Jodi's friends and Jodi's golf coach, to hear the stories of when Jodi first got interested in golf, hearing that from the coach. It was just great. And for me, not being in the media business and, not getting to know who Jodi really was growing up, it really helps and keeps us motivated, keeps me motivated.
Just for the record, I just want to correct something that Jay's handicap is the lowest on the team. So if anybody's wondering who the best golfer is on the team, it would be Jay Alberio.
Well, I don't even count because I spent the whole time indoors with Joanne. So
Practice makes perfect, and he's
right.
getting
Right.
a lot of practice these days.
Scratch golfer in the works here.
yeah.
I mean, I'd love
Someday.
to dispute that, but that's true. That's the truth. Speaking of that, though, and he may be a guest on the podcast at some point, but Jodi's golf coach we got to talk to a little bit. And he's now 80, Jay, I think. Still as sharp as a tack, tells all kinds of stories about Jodi, and he won the closest to the pin contest for the whole tournament at 80 years old,
Amazing.
which was humbling for Jay and I. But Jay did carry the FindJodi team. So,
Oh, it was a team effort. Always, as always, team effort.
speaking of the podcast, I'm curious what you guys all kind of think. If there's an episode or two that we've done so far, and we've got more planned for the rest of the summer and beyond, hopefully. Was there anything from the podcast that stood out to any of you?
Of the interest level in terms of just managing the site for how many years? I don't know how many it's been. The interview with Amy Coons that I did probably back in 2011 or so. People are very interested to hear what she had to say. Now, you recently just completed that episode. So that I know people are going to be very interested to hear from Amy, to hear what she has to say, what she remembers working with Jodi. So I think that was one we all wanted to do. We wanted to get in touch with Amy, and you guys did a great job on putting that together. So I think that was a very good episode to give people an idea of what life was like back then in Jodi's professional career and working closely with Amy, and what Amy dealt with during those times.
And that was, I would say that's maybe partially because it's the most recent one, but that was one of the most emotional ones that hit me the most. Sitting there with Amy at lunch before we actually recorded the podcast and realizing how much her life has been impacted. If you Google Amy Coons, you just find Jodi Huisentruit. She is defined by this incident,
Right.
very traumatized. She's been through a lot of therapy, and I was crying. I got in my car later and cried, and it was very emotional. And I think to think that what she's been through, some of the people online accusing her of having some kind of plan to get Jodi's job, and she's lived with that. But it was also inspiring because I think she's gotten some help and she's trying to move on with her life. But Scott and I were both very taken by meeting with her and our podcast, our interview with her.
Yeah, I think that podcast has got to be one of the most touching or important, because Amy was the last person to talk to Jodi that we know of, and she was right there in the mix of the whole thing that morning of what was going on. So I think that was probably one of the better ones now.
I think also the Miata, you guys tracking down the Mazda Miata, Jay and Scott traveled out to see it, and here we have the actual vehicle that Jodi drove that morning is something that's just unbelievable. It's still around and in such good shape. If anybody's listening and wants to check out the list of all the podcasts, all you need to do is go to findjodi.com, hover over the media button, and go to podcast. And there you'll get the whole list of all the podcasts if you're new to the site, and that'll break it down for you.
That was definitely an impactful one for me. That was a surreal moment to see the car. I actually got to sit in the car. It was bizarre. It was all kinds of different things. But yeah, you're right, Josh. It's in such great shape. It's been kept as kind of a hobby car. That's another thing for me that brought it back home, that this is part of the history of the case, I guess. Jay, one of the other episodes, actually 2 episodes that you and I did on Tony Jackson, sticks with me too, because it was so detailed and so in-depth. I don't think that kind of detail, that kind of work, I guess, has been done on Tony Jackson as perhaps relates to Jodi's case. What were your impressions of that episode? And it sort of, if you want to tell the story, played a part in some of your outreach efforts to him in prison over the last year.
Right. One thing, I base a lot of my discussion answers to the questions on Tony Jackson on who I knew Tony Jackson was back in 1997 when we encountered him and arrested him and spent 4 hours in an interview room with him. And I've been, over the years, and more recently, pretty steady reaching out to Tony Jackson via emails. And we were really close to getting into having an appointment to sit down and meet with him, because I want to get to know who Tony Jackson is now. And one of the things any investigation does, if you have a person that could possibly involved. You want to investigate that person to the point that either A, you can show that the person is responsible for a crime, or B, that the person absolutely could not have committed that crime. And part of my push to meet with Tony Jackson is to try that, to try to see if we can eliminate him and we can move on and we can say, we've thoroughly investigated Tony Jackson and there is absolutely no way that he could be involved in it. And unfortunately, I actually had a meeting, a visitation set up with him for a Sunday afternoon, and it was 2 days before was scheduled to meet with him. He emailed back and canceled my visitation rights and said it was not in his best interest to meet with me any longer. Somebody had sent him a copy, a transcript, or something of the podcast we did about Tony Jackson. And I've told him that the same thing you just said, that I need to get to know who Tony Jackson is today. Let's see. Show me that you weren't involved. We'll be the first one to say Tony Jackson couldn't have been involved. We have to have some proof, some facts that show that. And to me, that hasn't been done, and I'm still not giving up, and still going to continue to email him and see if we can get that door open again.
And I think it's so important what Jay is doing there, because if Tony Jackson's not involved and, say, down the road somebody else is charged in connection with Jodi, he's going to be alternate suspect number one. And it's really important that it's shown that he was vetted every way possible. And I know Jay's frustration over the years has been feeling that he wasn't checked out. But the last thing you want to do is have somebody else who's not Tony Jackson, who did take Jodi, charged, and have the Jackson factor keep a jury, from coming up with clear not having reasonable doubt. So I think it's really important that he be eliminated. And just what Jay said his goal was in a meeting with him, maybe there's something Jackson knows that he can share with us. Jay would be the first, I believe, to come out and say it's not Tony Jackson.
Yeah, and to this day, I'm still not saying Tony Jackson is the one. He might know something. He was in that circle of friends. We know through others that he had met Jodi. Maybe he has a piece of information that might help lead to somebody else. And without sitting down and being able to talk to him face to face, we might not get that information. So if this ever gets to Tony Jackson, I invite you to open that door and let's set up a visitation.
Yeah, I think it was kind of interesting to all of us that, you were set up with your meeting, COVID protocols and the whole thing, and the day before, I think, right, you said? I think it was the day before, he sent a copy of the podcast and he apparently listened to it and said, no, it's not in my best interest, which was interesting.
Right, and we still don't know who sent that, but again, all the questions and answers, my answers to the questions were based on the facts of what happened with Tony Jackson back in 1997, a series of rapes, and the information leading to him being in the area or living just blocks away from where Jodi worked. So it's just, to me, the accountability, the alibi is not there that we can, without a shadow of doubt, say that it's not possible for him to be involved. But again, we're not saying he is the one that's involved. There needs to be more work done, like Caroline says, to eliminate him if they ever do get a suspect. Because if they do, Tony Jackson is going to be the next person in line for the defense to bring up and say, hey, it could be this guy.
And hey, there's been a lot of investigation on Tony Jackson. If you look back from Caroline's reporting back at WCCO, very in-depth reports. Jay, you've covered it in your professional career and in post-career and with the FindJodi team. So it's not like we haven't covered this ground, extremely well, and we continue to, and there's a lot of questions still there. So yeah, I think it's very important that we keep that door open to figure out, what is the situation here and could he be involved without shutting the door and say, hey, he's just not a suspect.
Looking back over the things we posted and the podcast episodes over just the last year, I couldn't believe some of these. I would have sworn they happened prior to a year ago. But in just the things that are new in the last year that the team has worked on or published, Caroline, you did a lot of work on this one. There was that confusion over the black truck or the white truck that was supposedly following Jodi one day, and you were able to finally clear that up through just an incident report that you got from MCPD.
Exactly. And I should also qualify that a number of years ago, Josh and Gary Peterson, who co-founded FindJodi, had an interview with Lieutenant Ron Vanderweerd, and he brought it up back then as well. And he said, no, it was white, not black, because the police chief in the early days called it black. It had been reported in the media for many years. And then again, as recently as the last 4 or 5 years, a Mason City police investigator is describing it as black. And it's hard to know the significance of black versus white, but whatever, it's been out there as a black truck when in fact the police report, which we just obtained in the past year, said it's white. And some investigators I've talked with from other departments said they feel more should have been done to put a word out. Do you know anything back then, anybody who might have been following you in a white truck? What if that is connected to Jodi? Again, we've heard investigators dismiss the idea that it might have been a stalker following Jodi who was involved in her abduction, but we know in fact she actually made a police report in October of 1994 that a truck had been following her. After that, we know from friends and others, including some self-defense instructors, that Jodi had concerns as recently as 2 months before she was abducted, that she felt she was being followed. So clearly there's some kind of indication, concerns about a stalker. Now, was a stalker involved in Jodi's case or not? We don't know, but we felt it was really important to get the facts. And that's a big part of what our whole thing is with a podcast, is to find out what's accurate. And sometimes that means getting conflicting reports out of the police department themselves, giving different stories about what happened.
One of the other things that we worked on earlier this spring, and FindJodi over the years has been present for several digs or excavations with police, and we were involved in another one of those earlier this year. We haven't commented on or published anything about it yet, but we were present with multiple law enforcement agencies at a site in rural Iowa, and they were interested in this area, this property, and they were excavating. They were digging for over a couple of days. We haven't, again, reported that yet, and there's still some facts to work out. But there are things, Caroline and I have mentioned this on the podcast in the past, there's a lot behind the scenes that FindJodi does. And over the years, if you look back, Josh, Gary, the whole team has been involved in these tangible, physical, on-the-ground digs. And now that another anniversary goes by, Josh, when you look back at those, is that, I guess I want to ask, can you believe it? Because it's been so long, and you guys were involved with the police in excavating some of these areas and chasing thousands of leads at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to the early days of the website. It's hard to say. I think it was 2003 when it finally took off, and the leads we would get were just all over the place. But we got some pretty good ones, and Gary and I were pretty diligent in following them up. I was a young reporter. He was a news director at the time. We had a GM, a general manager at the station, who was very open to working on this case. Thank goodness, because these days you couldn't buy that kind of time at a TV station to say, hey, go out and investigate this story. You'd be hard pressed to try to get that time. But back then it really worked out for us. But through that time frame, Gary and I had a great, experience in going around and being a part of each of these leads and seeing them through to the end. For instance, I remember one dig in Green, Iowa. There was a mound of earth in the woods that a couple had called in, and they were really concerned about it. And, the timeline of when it appeared was close to when Jodi disappeared. And it came through to the website, and we ended up, meeting these people and talking with them and having an interview. And they invited us out. And at the time, the sergeant on the Mason City Police Department assigned to the case came with us. And, we made sure that everything was done by the book. So we went out there, and the landowner brought out his backhoe. I mean, this huge backhoe came out in the woods, and he just started tearing apart the ground. And we just really dug this all up. I mean, there was a lot of yards of dirt that was moved, and nothing was found. I mean, this was something where, we talked to the sergeant. He said, hey, this is what we were here to do. We want to make sure we get through to the bottom of every case. And in this case, nothing was found. I think we found a receipt from an old cash register, which is very strange. And we found a couple other items, but that was it.
Did you think that was going to be the day in your mind?
Yeah, because every time you go to these situations, you're like, this is it. And every time, and Jim Feldhaus, if you follow this website, Jim Feldhaus' name. He is someone out of South Dakota who worked on this case extensively. I remember getting calls from Jim. I would be in the middle of the cereal aisle at a grocery store, and Jim would call, and he'd be like, in his low voice, "Josh, this is it. It's over. We found it. This is the end." He'd say, "This is." He'd be rattling off all these details of what happened and what he discovered and what this new lead was. Now, obviously, from a journalist perspective, you got to go step by step and say, "All right, it sounds good. I mean, I think could be the end, but until you see the final product of an investigation, this isn't obviously it." So anytime those moments happened, yes, you were totally fired up, and Gary and I would get so excited about everything that came in because equally exhausted because we would track down everything. Another instance was Eagle Lake. There was an instance where the landowner there said, around the time there's circumstantial evidence that a couple of guys in the neighborhood were related to the disappearance, and he was sure that this had happened. That they were responsible, and they went on his property, and there was a mound of earth behind his yard in a bog, and it was elevated, and that had to be it. So we really spent a lot of time on this one. So Eagle Lake lead, we called it. We went out there, and finally, ground penetrating radar, the landowner paid a company to come out with ground penetrating radar, and we were out there at the time, and we followed them through the whole process, back and forth, tracking the ground, getting the results of this search and this excavation and analysis, and nothing was found. And that was frustrating because that one I was really kind of invested in terms of how much time and energy we put into that lead. So that was frustrating, but that didn't turn out to be the answer. And it takes us back to Jodi's apartment. At one point, somebody said, "Have you ever looked under Jodi's apartment?" I said, "No, we haven't. I mean, that's crazy. Who would think that a crime would be committed and it would end under her apartment?" Well, we went back to the Mason City Police Department, and the sergeant at the time in charge of the investigation came with us, and we met at the time the caretaker of the Key Apartments, and he brought us down under Jodi's apartment building. There's actually a ladder that leads down. If you watch the Huisentruit file, you'll see some of the video of that. Leads down under the building, and there's a crawl space, and it's actually pretty huge. It's this wide open space. It's probably 4.5 feet tall, and it's all dirt. And there's one corner that's a big mound, and we didn't want to leave that there. So actually the sergeant at the time took a shovel, and we sat and watched him dig. And it was a job. Like, he was digging this mound of earth under Jodi's apartment, but nothing was found. So 3 examples of just dig after dig after dig, and this was just a few of the many that we've been on.
Did you guys
So many.
always contact her family when this would happen?
Yes, Gary was actually really good about reaching out to Joanne and saying, "Hey, this is what we just learned," and now Caroline has taken a great job in that role.
Yeah.
Every time we have something that's even, prompting the radar. Caroline, you've been fantastic about reaching out to Joanne, keeping those lines of communication open, just in the event that something could trigger a major development. And I think that's very important. And I think that's what we base our whole organization on, is being transparent and being, true to the family, because that's why we're here. We want to solve this for the family, because
it's so tough.
why
for
else
them.
would we be here?
Well, there's something called ambiguous loss, which is every time there's a new scenario, could this be it? And that's what Joanne, Jodi's sister, and family live with. Could this be the one? And one of these eventually is likely to be the one, but you don't know when you first get that tip, and you chase it, and you want to prepare the family to the best we can. We try to make calls and find out how likely does this sound. Recently, there were some human remains found in the river behind Jodi's place. Pretty good indication it wasn't connected to Jodi, but boy, I was getting calls from the media. We all were, and then made some calls, and it said, no, it's probably connected to a woman whose partial remains had been found earlier in the year. I did everything I could to let Joanne know that before she got the phone calls.
Right.
Another thing in the past year, now this is a smaller one, but in terms of thinking, oh my gosh, this is it. We've had a couple tips about a photo that we had on our website that showed Jodi at eating pizza with some people, and there were some females, some guys, and somebody was convinced, person we heard from who had worked with Dustin Honkin, who, as you recall, was involved with Angela Johnson in killing 5 people as part of a drug murders in Iowa. And they said, this was Dustin Honkin. And you looked at it, and I looked at his mugshot, I showed it to a bunch of other people. That has to be the guy. And we started doing some checking and thought, if there's any way Jodi had been sitting eating with Dustin Honkin, there must be some connection. Well, as it turned out, we ended up putting the photo back on our Facebook page along with some others just saying, can you help us identify people? Turns out the photo was from a college friend, and this actually was taken in Europe when Jodi was studying abroad. It had nothing to do with Dustin Honkin, but to this day, Jodi's family has heard from people saying Jodi was seen having lunch with Dustin Honkin. Not true. I'm grateful that we had the means of the Facebook and media to put it out there and eliminate that lead, but I sat frozen in my car for about 6 hours one day a year ago here in California thinking, oh my gosh, this has to be it. It wasn't.
That was an amazing photo. The thing I remember about that photo, and this is a kind of a good peek inside the curtain a little bit too, is in part of verifying that photo and where it was taken, I can remember, I think they were eating Domino's pizza and drinking Pepsi. And so I can remember researching the entire history of franchises of Domino's Pizza, and when Pepsi changed their canning, their logo on their can, to try to verify that that's when that picture was taken and where they were.
And Scott, that's why you're hired, because you do that.
That's amazing.
That's the kind of diligence you put into the organization.
Oh, it's incredible.
Those are the rabbit holes we get lost down. And even, even that's not the big stuff. When you go that deep and you find something, it's easy to get hooked on that, I think. So you have to not get tunnel vision on any one theory. And I think we've all seen people over the years, with this case especially, get that this is my theory, I'm addicted to it, and I'm married to it. And they get lost a little bit. You have to, I think, and you guys would know more than I, but you have to be able to walk backwards out of the cave at some point.
And that's one of the big roles I think Tara brings to the table. I think you're particularly good at saying, hey, you bring this sort of alternate perspective. Divergent thinking, something when we get all caught up, you're really good at saying, hey, wait a minute, or what about this? And I think that's been a really strong.
Are you saying I'm a jerk, Caroline? I'm just kidding.
No, you're not afraid to poke. I think you really keep us on track.
That's the
we need that.
TV producer for you. That's the digging.
Yeah.
No, I think that one thing, Josh and I just said to Josh at the beginning, there was certain names. I remember I had this yellow legal pad. And Gary and I were on a phone call, and Josh and I were just friends. We were working together, and he's like, I really think you'd be interested in this case. I was like, yeah, I'll take a listen. So we ended up getting on the phone, and I think it was like 3 hours later. And I had all these names written down and all these like arrows written of who's connected to who. And I was like, we're going to solve this tonight.
Yeah.
And here we are 12 years later.
If I had $1 for every time we said we're going to solve this tonight, I'd be a rich man.
And I remember you and Gary and I sitting in his house, quite a few different times, and he would bring out this big, what was it? Whiteboard. Yeah. And he'd sit there, and we'd each have a glass of wine, but then we'd just stop, and he'd be drawing arrows to this and saying all these different things, and we'd just keep going and going and going. And, you just hope that one of those thoughts leads to the right thing. But it's sad because I can only imagine if we are like this, what it's like to be a member of her family.
And Gary and I chased a lot of leads, and I'll never forget one. We were on a trip, and we had to share a hotel room because obviously it was a lower budget operation. So we really had to, save the bucks back in the early days. So we rented a hotel, and oh my gosh, it was about 62 degrees, maybe 59 degrees in that room, and I slept on the floor. And I'll never forget. I'm like, Gary, you're crazy. You're crazy that you sleep in this cold of weather. I can't do it. And the next morning, I don't think I slept a wink, but the next morning we went on our way and kept on tracking down what we were doing. But this case has brought us a long way.
Josh, I think that's where we are. Someone asked me recently in an interview, how long will you stay on this? And it's like, how do you stop? I think we all need answers, or most of all Jodi's family, but I think all of us in the team need it. We have been committed for so many years, and it just feels like such unresolved, unfinished business. And what are we not doing that might make a difference? I think our TV news backgrounds and Jay's background in law enforcement, that combination gives us a unique background and perspective to help solve this case. Mm-hmm. But we still don't know. I feel like, do we really know any more than they did 26 years ago? I hope so.
I keep telling myself we'll fall into place, whether we find it or whether it's gifted to us.
Yes.
Whether somebody finds something or whether somebody admits something or whether we just track it down with just good old investigative work.
And I think that what we need most is for someone to step forward.
Right.
Yes.
With some credible information. Mm-hmm. Because, hey, no one's going to live forever. And we don't want this story to die with someone. We want this story to live on so that Jodi's family can get some answers.
And by the way, taking it from, news organizations, and I work for the news, how much incorrect information has been put out there by various news agencies.
About this story.
Yeah, about this story. One thing I can be happy to say is that we've corrected a lot of misinformation out there, whether it's, things that happened leading up to her disappearance or just thereafter. I mean, we've tracked down the timeline pretty closely of everything that have happened. And it's been so widely misreported over the years that I feel pretty good about kind of nailing that down.
I think that's been really a big part of the goal of our mission of our podcast is to get it as accurate as possible, to correct things that maybe we had that weren't correct in the past. And it's a fluid process, but I feel we have done that because not having it accurate can have people way off in the wrong direction. So I do feel that is a huge role that we do fill, regardless of where it goes. I hope we're the information source of record that will stand the test of time.
The fact checkers.
Yes.
And just for some more inside baseball when it comes to the podcast, I've never had an editor as tough as Caroline. Ever. So I'll
That's a good thing.
I'll
that's
finish.
a great
It's great.
You've got the most experience, and she's so buttoned up and so knowledgeable and
So
we're all
annoying. So
lucky.
annoying. Yeah.
No, you're not. We're so lucky to have you on the
thank
team,
you.
Caroline. Seriously, no one can put the credibility that you have. I mean,
You had think of the press you had back in the reporting days when you had to get it past your executive producers and your news directors and your legal department. I mean, those are the years you really earned your stripes.
They trained, but it is different. We're on our own. We're this nonprofit just out there. We don't have, this
The legal
back
team.
hole about people helping us, and so I feel it. And I'm the piece I'm doing on the anniversary is 26 facts in 26 years, and I keep going back saying, okay, I'm trying to make this as accurate as possible, and it's very humbling. It's like, okay, make sure, and what are you doing to check and recheck and crossing your T's and dotting your I's, and I just think that's so important because, as you said, there's so much bad information out there, and it gets continued. It drives us all crazy. So, we talk about the blood evidence thing comes up over and over. There is no blood evidence at the scene, but you look at so many old stories, and it says that. And then that raises hope that, okay, we can get familial DNA and all this stuff. And unfortunately, there's no case I've ever covered that had less information, no eyewitnesses, no Jodi, no victim, as we have in this. This is as tough as it gets.
And unfortunately, in this case, especially recently, when you Google the Jodi Huisentruit case, some of the information that comes up is misinformed or at least unverified, and it's out of our control. There's nothing we can do about that. But you're right. I mean, that's as best we can amongst our team members. We strive for accuracy, which is hard enough anyway in a case this old where it's kind of convoluted, but then you get confused facts or misreporting, and it's difficult. But that's sort of at the core of our mission. When we're not reporting on 100% of what we learn, that's the reason why.
And one of the things I should point out here, and you can jump in as well, is there's a lot we're doing that you'll never see, whether it's somebody else's tip or whatever. We don't it's not like what I call police scanner chatter. You hear it and you put it on the air. We spend a lot of time digging, and if we don't feel comfortable enough in our own verification, our own sources, you're not going to see it on our website. We're going to do what we can do. We're not going to put everything out there. So you may wonder, why isn't FindJodi reporting on this latest thing? Well, we're not going to do it unless we know we have verified it.
Yeah, how many stories have we discussed and dropped, just in the verification process of if this was enough to put online or not? I mean, it goes through the filter and it goes through the process before we put it online.
Well, even before we started recording this podcast, I won't go into detail. We were discussing something we've been working on, and we just didn't feel we're ready to go public. It doesn't mean we're not spending a lot of time digging, and we'll continue to, but we have to feel comfortable that we have crossed all the T's, dotted all the I's to the best that we can before we're going to put it out there publicly.
and respect the family.
Yep, absolutely.
Yes.
And Caroline, along those lines, with Jodi's friends and family, one of the mantles you principally took up this year from the team is you noticed in doing some research at some point, I can't remember when, but the classification of Jodi's case is it the DCI has her classified as an involuntary disappearance?
Right. What it is the DCI, the Iowa Division of Criminal Investigations, that has a missing person clearinghouse, and it lists Jodi as her incident as an involuntary disappearance. And it goes on later to say that foul play is suspected. That has bugged me for some time because clearly it's an abduction. It's not an involuntary disappearance, But the more I dug, I reached out to first the DCI to see if they could change it to call it abduction or kidnapping. And then they sent me to the Mason City Police, the primary agencies. They said they would have to do it. Mason City looked at it and they said of the options we're looking at, that is the only one that we have. Well, just as recently as today, I talked with someone at DCI who said basically they are following the NCIC, the federal guidelines on how they describe something. And even though it may seem kind of less severe than it should, this is the verbiage that they use federally. So it still bugs me. It still seems like Jodi Huisentruit should not be listed as an involuntary disappearance. But in the world of law enforcement, that is significant. To her family and to others just looking at it, I think it makes it seem less severe than it is. So we may have to take our efforts, say, with the federal government or the people in Washington to see if they would reconsider it or make a good case why they can't just say abduction. And not just for Jodi's case. There are a number of other cases that fit into that. But it just feels like Jodi's case should be called an abduction, kidnapping, not just involuntary disappearance.
Well, maybe it's a bureaucratic thing, but it's a cold-sounding classification.
Her family felt that way, and they said if we needed any support in our efforts to change it, they would support us. But I'm trying to get as much information as possible to understand how this was started many years ago, because some other states I've looked at, they don't even list that. They just describe it, but that's just the way it falls into it. So we're going to continue to dig on it to see if there's a way we can maybe get that reclassified.
Yeah, because that's an obvious one. I mean, I'm glad you're tackling that because it bugs everybody. I think that it's not classified correctly.
Yeah, there's no question about it. It's an abduction.
And that's what it means. If you look at their digging, that's what it means. But it seems to me, why not just get away from this umbrella description and say what it is?
Right.
For Jodi and anybody else that fits in that category. Because it means a lot to the families. Yes, law enforcement gets it. People in the know get it. But those who care the most, it just feels like another insensitive moment for them to deal with.
Sort of along those lines, Caroline, at the golf tournament, you got to spend a lot of time with Joanne. You know her pretty well over the years. Say as much as you're comfortable as saying, but how is she and how are the rest of her close friends that you've talked to over the last year? I mean, it's another year gone by, but sort of where are they at in this day and age?
Her friends were pretty upbeat at the golf tournament because it's something that honors Jodi's legacy. It raises money. It raises for scholarships and awareness. But you spend 3 hours with Joanne while everybody was out golfing, and we were going through Jodi's personal albums, her photo albums, and I took many, many pictures, some that I'll be posting on our site. And I felt like it was another side of Jodi I learned about. I saw a man that she dated for 7 years, her high school and then college boyfriend. And that's a part of Jodi I'd never seen before. It was very, very sad. Joanne is living with the most horrible thing, to not know what happened to her baby sister. It's very, very difficult. And I left just like the day before with Amy Coons. That was very sad. And then being with Joanne, I realized so many people are affected by what happened to Jodi, and they need answers. And Joanne knows it's not going to be a good answer. She wrestles with what's a better scenario, say somebody who maybe liked her and snapped, or a rapist or somebody horrible. I mean, what horrible things to have to wrestle with as you think about what happened to your sister who was 18 years younger. It was very sad. One thing that touched me is I recently made some FindJodi hats. I was having a low day, and so I went to a local shop here in Petaluma where I live, and I asked them to make me some FindJodi hats just so I can wear one running. And I brought one along, and I asked Joanne if she'd like it. She loved it. She put it on, and it felt so good to give her something tiny that was positive, but there's very little we can give Joanne that's positive. And I hope that by continuing our mission, keep it going, to know that Jodi's not forgotten, and that we get her answers. Again, the answers she knows are not going to be good, but it's better to be able to bring Jodi home to Long Prairie, to say goodbye, have some kind of ceremony, and know where she is and have her home.
After investing billions to light up our network, T-Mobile is America's largest 5G network. Plus, right now, you can switch, keep your phone, and we'll pay it off up to $800. See how you can save on every plan versus Verizon and AT&T at T-Mobile.com/across America.
Up to 4 lines via virtual prepaid card. Allow 15 days. Qualifying unlocked device credit service ported 90+ states with device and eligible carrier, and timely redemption required. Card has no cash access and expires in 6 months.
So I want to go around the table and just ask a hard question to answer, I think, but start with you, Josh. 26 years, you've been involved probably for most of it. And Caroline actually pointed this out to me, which I hadn't thought of. next year, if we get there with the unsolved disappearance of Jodi, she will have been gone for as long as she was alive on the 27th anniversary. But 26 years. What are your reflections? Has this last year changed anything for any reason, or sort of where's your head at this weekend?
Well, I can tell you I'm a different guy from 15, 20 years ago. When we first started this thing, like I said, in 2003 is kind of when it all started. So we're almost coming up on 20 years personally for it. When Gary and I started, I was way different than I am now. Obviously, I have 2 kids. I'm married. Tara and I are married, and life is a lot different than what it was. But I still look at this case as just it's so frustrating because I've spent so much time and I looked at so much video and spent so much time creating, information and documents and reviewing and digging and, cross-checking things with Gary and Tara and you guys. These years just fly by. So for me, it's more frustration at this point. I don't know how you can celebrate much of anything because we've continued so much and put in so much effort to not have any big developments, and that's why I'm frustrated. Some things have really surprised me. I mean, I think, like I said earlier about the timeline, about narrowing and nailing down these details so finely. When we first started, I mean, things even about the golf tournament, the last few hours of what she did, we were so off base. And in terms of the people she, was out with or friends with, we were so wrong on so many levels, and we thought we had it all figured out when we were in 2003, 4, 5, and we did the Huisentruit file. A lot of that has changed. So I feel like there's a lot of good work that's been put in. But what gives me kind of hope is some of these cases, I'm still active in TV news. I still read a lot of the news about what's happening with cold cases here in, Hillsborough County, Florida, Pinellas County, Pasco County. One
really
case.
Nationwide.
Yeah, nationwide. But one case was solved recently that was 20 plus years old. A couple weeks ago, we had one that was 30 plus years. So these cases are just, they're coming to a conclusion decades later. So that's what keeps me going and seeing that, wow, why can't it be this case? Why can't we find the final detail to give us the tip that just closes it? So frustration is a big element, but I think there's optimism in the fact that with so much technology and so many smart people, I think we can put this together and finally solve it. But I've said that for the last 10 years. So Tara smiles when I say that. She's like, yeah, you're stubborn. You think you're going to figure it all out. But
I think people like Caroline, Scott, Jay, you.
It's dedication.
It's just, the thing is, it's so frustrating.
Right. Because, I'm happy we put this organization together because if we shut this down tomorrow and shut the website off, what happens? Does somebody pick up the torch and continue? I don't think so. I think this case disappears, and unless somebody wants to give that confirmation that she's been found, I don't know where it ends. So I think what we're doing here is good. I think it's difficult, it's frustrating, but I'm happy to be working with you guys.
It's important.
And it's very important.
It's so meaningful.
I think, Josh, you touched on something there, too, that might help keep us all going. After 26 years, how are we still this year finding new information in this case? And like a half dozen fairly significant things that we've uncovered one way or another over the last year. That's amazing to me. And I guess
you're right.
That kind of gives me hope that if that can be uncovered, maybe the next thing will lead to the next thing, which leads to the answer.
Exactly. Well, even little things like tracking down the car. I would say the pandemic affected me in terms of saying, this is my month. My goal in August of last year was to let's find out where the heck that car is. And we found it. And it didn't necessarily provide any great forensic leads. It didn't do that. But I found that there is information that hadn't been tracked down. And I reached out I actually heard from someone in law enforcement close to the case who called and congratulated us in tracking it down. He would never say it publicly, but the law enforcement didn't have it, and it could have led to something. We don't know, so I felt good about that, getting that police report on the truck. It's the white truck, not a black truck. Maybe at some point there'll be somebody from 26, 27 years ago when Jodi was followed by a stalker. Maybe it'll resonate with somebody. That's what you hope for.
And a good point you make. It's Caroline. When we work on these cases and these leads, I think there's no better feeling of when you put in a ton of work on a lead. Like we had these digs, and they would finally not show anything. I don't know. There's a lot of satisfaction in the fact that hey, we met it and we brought it to the end, and there wasn't anything here, but boy, that feels good to like check it off the list and say finally some closure on that lead. Let's move on to the next one.
Well, when the current owner of the Miata mailed texted me a photo of the car after we've been working on it before Scott had gone to Wisconsin, and I saw it, and I just sat there and cried. I mean, it's like, how long have we been chasing this Miata that in many ways it seemed like, could it be the clue that's hiding in plain sight? It's right there. And it didn't lead to where we thought, but we at least were able to cross off some things and get some answers. And I think that's important sometimes, to eliminate information that may not be relevant, but just kind of deal with it.
So, Tara, same question to you. Where are you at with this case now?
I just want closure for her family. I mean, that's really what this is all about, right? For each of us, I think that it's something that we care about deeply, but at the same time, we aren't the ones going to sleep at night thinking, God, where's my sister? Where's my aunt? And I think all you can do is ask for answers.
And I want to, and based on, we live this news cycle, and tonight in Surfside, there's 99 people missing from a collapsed
which is
condo building.
Making us just sick to our stomach.
Tara and I have been up.
I worked 6 blocks from this building and had
Oh my gosh.
coworkers who lived there. They do not currently.
But you said everybody who works, a lot of people who works there know somebody who lives there.
I've been texting with everyone all day. It's been a very heavy day. And everyone says they know someone who has or does live there. And it's heavy. And so, unfortunately, in this news cycle, there's always something like this. But these people have some answers. Jodi's family doesn't.
Good point.
And I think that's something that you need, that resolution. It's a lot like Jennifer Kessie, which is a story I covered extensively in Orlando. And if you don't have answers,
that's hell.
Sleeping at night is hard.
It's pure hell.
And I just feel that everyone deserves them, so we hope to find them. I don't really know what else to say. It's heartbreaking.
Caroline, that's that loss that you were talking about earlier that very few of us can relate to, ourselves included, fortunately, but it is something that Joanne has had to deal with, and we were talking with Amy about her mom especially dying without knowing answers to what happened to Jodi. Where are your reflections now, and have they changed over the last year for any reason?
I would say, just starting back when I first covered the case back in 1997, to me it was an intriguing mystery. And I look now, it was something I did working at WCCO. I love the digging on it, but now it's I feel that Joanne is almost like an extended part of my family, Jodi's sister. If I'm not digging, I feel like I'm letting her down. And I find not having answers at times, I feel like I'm letting her down, but I feel it's such an important sense of doing something meaningful. All of us are doing this for free. This is not a job that we're working on. This is something we come to the table and care about. And it's kind of frustrating, rewarding at the same time. Just listening to all of you tonight, it's inspired me to give it another year, then hopefully not another year, but to not let go and do it as long as we can use the skills we have with our backgrounds to help bring Jodi home. Jodi was one of ours. Jodi was part of our family. And until we know that what happened to her wasn't connected with what she did in TV news, I take the point of view that it probably was, and I feel we owe it to her and her family to bring her home.
And Jay, I don't know, I don't want to speak for you, but part of what bothers me about this case is the person that did it, possibly, if not probably, still alive. At some root level, it pisses me off that they haven't been caught yet. And I felt like you might be able to relate to that as an investigator, former law enforcement. How do you view this case?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say is that if the police had put in the effort and time that Gary and Josh did initially, and over the years going, since the foundation of FindJodi, the amount of time and the work that's gone into this, is if the police had put that much effort in, I have a feeling that probably could have been solved years ago. But it isn't solved. And throughout my career in law enforcement, it always upset me when there was crimes committed and you couldn't bring the people responsible for the crimes, hold them responsible or bring them to justice, and this is 26 years. Jodi has been gone. Perpetrators gotten away with this for 26 years. Yes, it's very maddening. Not kinda. It is very maddening that this person has got away with this, and it's upsetting. And I can't imagine being a sister or mother of a victim. My wife has had a couple of friends that have had their daughter, and one case, the daughter was murdered in Burnsville, and my wife's very good friends with her to this day. They always talk to, Lisa, the mother of the victim. So I have a little bit of a heart there with that. And she has another friend that she worked with at her, it was like a triple homicide in St. Paul. And my wife's friend, it was her son that was killed in it, and his girlfriend. So, there's that part of me that makes this connection to Jodi. And of course, being law enforcement, I like to see people held responsible or made accountable for their actions, of course. And yeah, I think it's going to be solved someday. Look back just a few weeks ago, we had another bit of information. Has it panned out to anything? Not yet, but it's a piece of information that we're following up on. So there's information out there, and it's got to be, this case has got to move forward because, like Josh said earlier, there's people that are no longer on this earth that had information. The one individual that Caroline did a story on that supposedly Tony Jackson recited this rap to, he's gone. The supervisor that Tony Jackson worked for, that might have had information, he's gone. There's a waitress at Perkins. Is she still around? We don't know. She's probably in her 80s. But people are dying, and they're taking the information to their grave with them. So it is upsetting from a law enforcement perspective.
It's just wrong on that level,
Right.
And then you get to the emotion of it all. Among the other things that keeps me going, and we'll wrap it up here because when we get on a call, we can talk for hours, but I'm sort of haunted by the possibility, if not the probability, that we have seen the name or we have the information and we just haven't gotten the tip to advance that, or we just haven't moved forward. Is that something any of you have thought about before?
Oh, yeah. I've seen a lot of archival video, and I've watched. And there's even been tips about some of the video we've had saying, hey, this person, this person, this person. But to think of the fact that we've looked at or studied the person who did this is really terrifying, in the fact that we've been close, and we don't know that at this point.
The other thing we wrestle with is that people's memories are not so good. A lot of them are pretty shot 26 years later. I had a thing not too long ago on a tip somebody shared with us, and I went to the original source of the tip. The person did not remember that information at all. Well, it turned out that same person had written a letter to somebody we know 26 years ago with the information, so I know it was accurate. But what do you do with that? How many other memories are fading, or people, as Jay said, have passed away? The number of people in the key apartments we've reached out to died in the past 10 years. So it's not getting better.
Who's scared to come up because they're scared of what, who they're telling things to.
Mm-hmm.
We've had tips about high up individuals in the community. We've had tips about the police department. We've had tips about people in powerful positions. We don't know the answer. That's the problem. Like, it could be someone that we would least expect. You just never know.
What I think we want to say most of all is that no one needs to be scared to
Right.
say something.
Correct.
I think that the time is now. You've waited 26 years. Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's
Right.
say it. And let's bring some closure. And hopefully by Christmas, we'll have some answers for
Wouldn't
Joanne.
that be nice? Yeah.
One of the things we did today is I posted some pictures from one of Jodi's college roommates. It's Jodi at her friend's wedding and some other photos. And I've been told that that's one way to maybe reach somebody, that it helps you see the Jodi who's lost. But it also, I hope somebody looking at that might say, look at all the people who need answers. And what if it were your sister? What if it's your cousin? If you don't want to go to law enforcement, if you don't want to go to the Mason City Police or the DCI or FBI, we have a tip line. Come to Find Jodi, but don't sit on it for another year. Don't make Jodi's family and loved ones wait another year for answers.
Well, just imagine what that would be like if you've had this back of your mind suspicion for 25 years or whatever the length of time is, and the case is eventually solved and you find out that you were right. That's a long time that you could have come forward and...
Sure. Just in the last few weeks, we've had tipsters reach out to say, I've never come forward before, but I felt you should know this information. You know, we get those emails quite a bit. So, I mean, 26 years later, this person is saying, I've never come forward, but I think you should have this information. Right. That's pretty powerful. And
even if they think it's something so insignificant,
exactly,
it could be the one thing that leads to the answer, and that's all we want.
Because we have kind of a big chart of how everything we've looked at is laid out, and if you can plug in that missing piece, that could be the answer to this whole thing.
If you're still thinking about something after all that time, it's probably not unimportant, I would say.
Correct.
It's been bothering you for years.
Good point. Yep.
Yeah. What harm is it going to do at this point after 26 years?
One thing I do want to say before we wrap up, in terms of the website, in terms of the forum, in terms of anything related to how this case is covered, we'd love your feedback. You know, Scott leads the charge on the podcast. He's done a great job, and I hope you guys enjoy it. But in terms of anything we can be doing that you'd like to see more of, please reach out to us. Let us know. I want to do better on the video gallery. I want to get some more video up about Jodi. I want to get some images going. There's a section where you can upload your images if you have them of Jodi. So anything you can think of that you have any feedback, definitely just send it to us and let me know so we can get that put together.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast, our Team Roundtable, and for supporting Jodi's case by paying attention to it. Find Jodi is a nonprofit organization. All of the revenues from the site and this podcast are used to further our mission of bringing attention to Jodi's case. As always, anyone with information about Jodi's case can reach out to the Mason City Police Department or the Iowa Department of Criminal Investigations. We also accept named and anonymous tips at FindJodi.com. For the entire Find Jodi team, I'm Scott Fuller. Thank you for listening.